I ate dinner on the floor the night they left, not because I had to, but because it felt right. One greasy takeout container, a folding knife, and silence. The floors echoed in a way I hadn't heard since I bought the place. It was oddly comforting. All that space. All that stillness. 64 boxes sat in neat columns behind me, each labeled with surgical precision. Bathroom, hers. Tools, his. Borrowed. Kitchen, joint use but not owned. Items falsely claimed. My version of a peace treaty. 19 months ago, this place was mine. Entirely mine. My down payment. My mortgage. My chipped fingernails from scraping old wallpaper in the evenings. I was 31, newly promoted, and had just cut the last thread tying me financially to my family. Or so I thought. My brother called me 3 days after I closed, with that panicked but performative voice he uses when he wants something. "She's pregnant," he said, as if I hadn't already heard. "We just need somewhere to stay for a couple months. Just until we get on our feet." He said it like it was nothing. Like offering your newly bought apartment to a jobless couple with bad credit and a worse track record was just what good siblings did. I didn't say yes right away. That's what people always assume, that I'm soft or stupid or some martyr waiting to be taken advantage of. I'm not. I paused. I made rules. I gave timelines. But when I heard her in the background, sniffling, I cracked. I told them they could stay for 3 months. No longer. They agreed. We all agreed. And for a while, it felt okay. I cleared out the second bedroom, gave them a dresser, and even adjusted my work-from-home days so they could have the living room during interviews. I cooked. I cleaned. I gave them privacy. My parents called to praise me. "You're such a rock. We're so proud." Back then, I still thought that meant something. The thing about slow erosion is you don't notice until you're standing ankle-deep in mud. By month 4, they had a second-hand crib, a playpen, a couch someone had donated that replaced mine without warning. By month 6, she was nesting, folding tiny clothes, taping up inspirational quote decals over my bookshelves. And every time I said something, even gently, the answer was the same. "We thought you'd be cool with it." Cool with what? Having my home slowly converted into a nursery/shrine for a baby that hadn't even arrived yet? Having to knock on my own bathroom door? Tiptoeing around like a tenant in the place I paid for? When I pushed back, my mother called. "Be patient. He's trying his best. You're doing so well. Can't you just support him a little longer?" Translation: you're the stable one. Again. That night, I found my own comforter stuffed in a plastic bin marked extra linens. No one asked. No one apologized. The baby was born a week later. I loved that kid, even though I never asked for him. I held him at 3 a.m. when they were too tired. I bought diapers. I paid for formula when they overdrew their account. Again. I even added them to my utility bills to simplify things. But deep down, something in me started to rot. Not anger. Not yet. Something else. Like mildew forming behind tile. Hidden. Slow. I didn't know then that every sacrifice I made was being rewritten in their heads as evidence of shared ownership. That my generosity was being documented, not as kindness, but as passive consent. 19 months. That's how long it took to become the villain of my own story. By the 1-year mark, I stopped correcting people when they called it their place. Not because it was true, but because it was easier. You learn, after a while, that truth doesn't survive in families like mine. It gets softened, bent, rewritten under the weight of guilt and obligation. The apartment had shifted without me realizing it. What began as temporary support became helping them adjust, then giving them space to raise their child. And eventually, well, you're barely there anyway. I hadn't realized I'd been nudged into the role of guest in my own home. Subtle moves. Covert adjustments. I didn't see them take control. I saw it in hindsight. It started with the keys. One day, I came home and found a new lock on the door. "It's for safety," she said, rubbing her belly. "We needed a sturdier one for the baby." My key didn't work anymore. No one had asked. They gave me a copy like it was a favor. I should have known then. But I stayed quiet. Then came the decorations. The hallway became a gallery of their son's baby photos, handprints, ultrasound frames. My diploma came down from the wall. A whiteboard appeared in the kitchen, tracking feeding times and grocery lists, all in her handwriting. My fridge, once a sterile adult zone of meal prep and oat milk, became a chaotic mess of teething rings, leftover mush, and magnetic letters. When I started finding my own belongings boxed up and shoved into closets, I asked, just once, It's just until we get proper storage, she said, blinking like I was being unreasonable. This space works better as a play area now. I nodded. I always nodded. My brother, meanwhile, transformed into the kind of man who thrives on other people's silence. He started joking about our place with friends. Called me roomie at family dinners, like it was a sitcom. When he borrowed my laptop without asking and I confronted him, he laughed like I was being possessive. You're too uptight, he said. Relax. I did relax. I stopped offering rides. I stopped filling the fridge. I started going out more, working longer hours, crashing at friends' places on weekends. And still, the more space I gave them, the more they filled. My parents noticed, of course, but they didn't side with me. My mom pulled me aside at Easter and whispered, "You don't have to keep score, sweetheart. He's your brother." My dad just shrugged. You'll understand when you have kids. That line, when you have kids, always dangled in front of me like some moral trump card. As if parenthood automatically entitled you to other people's property. As if my autonomy was less valid because I didn't produce a tiny human. They all talk like I was lucky to be needed. Like it was an honor to be useful. The final straw, before the real final straw, was a dinner I didn't plan, in a home I owned, with guests I didn't invite. I came back from a conference to find the apartment full of laughter, beer bottles, and people I'd never seen before. She stood in the kitchen like it was hers. He played host like I didn't exist. One guy even asked me what time they bought the place, said he was looking for something similar. I didn't correct him. I didn't say a word. Instead, I packed an overnight bag and left. No note. No scene. Just silence. The next morning, I got a text from my mom. Don't make drama. It's just a party. You're being sensitive again. That word. Sensitive. Used like a weapon. As if being hurt by a boundary violation made you the problem. As if my growing resentment was some kind of character flaw. I wasn't being sensitive. I was being erased. And soon, they'd try to erase me completely. I didn't go home for 3 days after that party. I worked late, slept at a friend's, took my time. When I finally walked back in, the energy had changed. There was a rug I didn't recognize in the hallway. Gaudy, synthetic, beige. My books had been moved, again. My office chair replaced with a plastic one from IKEA. There were post-it notes on the pantry. Snacks only, one said. For toddler, another. My wine glasses were missing. The living room, my living room, had been converted into something between a daycare and a college dorm. Sticky handprints on the walls. A half-inflated bouncy ball rolling under the couch. A torn Amazon box spilling diapers next to the coffee table. But it was the bedroom door that did it. They had shut it. Locked it, actually. My room. The one I had asked to remain off limits. I stood there staring at it for a long time. I didn't knock. I didn't even try the handle. I just stood there, the hum of my own apartment suddenly foreign. Later that night, he texted me from the couch, 10 feet away. Hey, we needed the space for a bit. Kid was teething. Hope that's cool. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't living with them. They were letting me stay. I said nothing. I made no demands. I began gathering. First, my legal documents, deed, insurance, bank statements. I opened a secure storage unit for important items. Slowly, quietly, I removed anything sentimental. The handmade quilt from college. My passport. The photo albums. My mother had a saying, don't swing if you're not ready to finish the fight. So I didn't swing. But I did prepare. And still, they pushed. At a barbecue 2 weeks later, his girlfriend introduced herself to someone as co-owner of a condo uptown. She said it with a laugh, but I saw how she scanned my face as she said it. Like she was testing the waters. My brother chimed in. Yeah, it's basically ours now. She runs the place better than I ever could. Everyone laughed. I smiled, the kind that hurts your face. The word entitled doesn't even scratch the surface. They weren't just pretending. They were rehearsing. A few days after that, a small manila envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, a printed copy of the deed to my apartment, with a signature at the bottom that looked eerily like mine, but wasn't. Sloppy. Too neat, like someone tracing confidence. It had been notarized, falsely, clearly, and dated 3 months prior. I sat with that paper for an hour. No rage. No panic. Just clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. Someone in my own family had helped them do this. The next day, my mom invited me to the baby's second birthday party. A big celebration, she said. Come early. There's a surprise. I went. Of course I went. The apartment was packed. Balloons, banners, a DJ. Half the family. The other half I didn't even recognize. Someone brought a projector screen. And then it happened. A toast. My brother stood in the middle of my living room. Raised a glass, and thanked everyone for being part of this journey. He smiled wide. And today, we want to honor a gift that means more than we can ever say. He turned to me. This apartment, our home, was made possible by family. And today, we're making it official. Applause. I didn't move. My father rolled out a cake. 3 tiers, white fondant, gold lettering piped across it in curly script. Home sweet home, theirs. And below it, printed in edible ink, a mock-up of the deed. They all clapped like it was a wedding. I looked down at my shoes, clean on a floor I scrubbed with my own hands 1.5 years ago. Then I smiled. Just once. And left without a word. They'd made their move. Mine would be quiet. And final. I spent that night at a hotel. Nothing fancy, just quiet. I ordered room service, opened my laptop, and started making lists. Not angry lists. Not revenge plans. Just tasks. Things I had postponed, ignored, or softened over time in the name of keeping the peace. I started with the deed. That sloppy forgery? It was laughably invalid. But it meant they were confident enough to try. And that meant one thing. They believed I wouldn't fight. They were wrong. By morning, I had 3 meetings scheduled, a real estate lawyer, a notary fraud specialist, and my accountant. By noon, I had filed a complaint with the city clerk, submitted a request to flag the forged deed, and started the formal eviction process. The best part? Since they weren't on any lease, mortgage, or utility in their name, not a single one, I didn't even need to explain. They had no rights. They had relied on goodwill, not legality. And goodwill had expired. 2 weeks later, I walked back into my apartment with a sheriff and an official order. They weren't home. I took my time. I had already listed everything I owned and photographed every corner of the place. Every item they brought or claimed, boxed, labeled. Carefully. There were 64 boxes in total. Some were labeled with painful honesty. Bedroom, clothes, hers, gifted, not mine. Kitchen, pan set, wedding gift, and used, not requested. Living room, unsolicited wall art, live, laugh, love. Bathroom, clutter, expired products, not reimbursed. Miscellaneous, emotional debris. I boxed their life the way they tried to box me out of mine. Neatly, quietly, without apology. They came back later that night. My brother banged on the door. I didn't open it. He shouted through the hallway. I said nothing. The next morning, I had the 64 boxes delivered to their new address, her cousin's basement apartment. Delivery confirmed by text. His reply came within seconds. WTF is this? Where are our dishes? I didn't answer. A group text followed. Cousins, parents, uncles chiming in like clockwork. You didn't need to be cruel. They have a child. You should have talked to us first. How could you do this to family? I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app and began a series of clean, surgical operations. First, I revoked my mother's power of attorney. She didn't need it anymore, and never should have had it. Then, removed my father as beneficiary on my insurance. Added a friend instead. Next, unfroze a co-signed car loan for my brother, paid it in full, and transferred the title into his name, which triggered the full property tax bill to his mailbox. Then came the hardest part, closing the joint account I had with my parents. The one they used just for emergencies, but which had quietly bled hundreds a month for years. I left enough to cover the final automatic payments, then drained the rest. I sent one group message, short and clear. My accounts, my property, and my life are no longer shared. You may consider this the final update. Then I turned off notifications. That night, I came home to silence. Beautiful, echoing silence. No toys on the floor. No baby monitor blinking. No hushed arguments in the next room. Just me, and the gentle creak of my own apartment remembering itself. I sat down at the same spot where I ate dinner 19 months ago. Floor, folding knife, takeout. And I breathed. It wasn't rage. It wasn't victory. It was reclamation. And I wasn't done yet. The calls came first, then the emails, then the letters. At one point, I think my aunt even tried to message me through LinkedIn. The tone shifted quickly. The first wave was outrage. How dare you? You've destroyed this family. He's your brother. That didn't last long. The second wave was confusion, almost pitiful in tone. We just don't understand why you're doing this. You used to be so generous. Are you okay? The implication was clear. Only someone mentally unstable would set a boundary this firm. But it was the third wave that I had prepared for, desperation. The fallout of being cut off from me, not emotionally, but financially, hit harder than they expected. My father lost access to the emergency credit line I'd foolishly co-signed for years ago. My mother, who'd quietly built a retirement cushion on borrowed funds, now found herself budgeting for the first time in decades. My brother? Let's just say the basement apartment didn't come with central air or sympathy. There were late-night voicemails. Some slurred, some tearful. "You think you're better than us now?" No. I just finally realized I was never with them to begin with. I learned that my brother tried to reverse claim tenancy. He even showed up at the property office with the fake deed, the one I had already flagged and reported. The clerk told him to leave before security got involved. I heard, through a cousin, that my mother started organizing family meetings to discuss my behavior. They'd sit around someone's kitchen table and dissect my fall from grace. At one point, someone suggested I might have joined a cult. I suppose in their world, boundaries is a kind of cult. Meanwhile, I refinished the floors. Literally, I hired someone to strip the old laminate, replace it with real hardwood. I picked every plank myself. I watched them lay it down row by row, like rebuilding from the foundation up. Then came the walls, painted clean, soft colors. I threw out every object that reminded me of them. Not in anger, just spring cleaning for the soul. The apartment started to feel mine again, but in a new way. Not like it did before they arrived. Better, because now I understood what it cost to maintain that peace. Friends started visiting again. At first, they were cautious. They'd watched this saga unfold from the sidelines, afraid to say too much. But once they walked in and saw the emptiness, the fresh air, the stillness, they got it. One of them sat down, looked around, and whispered. I didn't realize how much it had changed. Neither did I. I started cooking again, reading, sleeping through the night. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. Not waiting to be needed. Not waiting to be praised. Just existing. Of course, my family didn't disappear entirely. These stories never wrap up that cleanly. One Sunday, I got a knock on the door. It was her, my brother's girlfriend, holding the baby, now a toddler. I didn't open it, but I did look through the peephole. She looked tired. Older. The baby squirmed in her arms, sticky and restless. She knocked again, then slipped an envelope under the door. Inside, a drawing. Crayon scribbles. A heart. No note. No name. Just that. I didn't throw it away. I also didn't respond. Some acts of kindness aren't invitations. They're closures. I stopped referring to them as my family after that. Not out of spite. Just accuracy. Words matter. Family had always implied something sacred, reciprocal, unconditional. What I had was conditional to the bone. Love with a ledger, affection tied to compliance. They didn't like the new version of me. The version that didn't explain, didn't comfort, didn't bail them out. They didn't know how to operate in a system where I wasn't footing the bill, emotionally, financially, or otherwise. I heard the stories trickle in over time. My brother tried to start a GoFundMe. The pitch was vague, unfair eviction, young family starting over. He left out the part about forged documents and 2 years of rent-free living. It barely raised $200, most of it from pitying friends of friends who'd never met me. My parents quietly sold off a few heirlooms, things my grandmother intended for me, by the way, to cover a tax bill they hadn't anticipated. I could have warned them. I used to. Not anymore. The family dynamic unraveled fast once my financial umbilical cord was cut. Turns out I wasn't just the responsible one. I was the infrastructure, the silent tech holding up the system. Remove the power source, and suddenly nobody knew how the lights worked. At one point, a second cousin reached out, someone I barely knew. Said he was neutral, just wanted to understand. He'd been told I kicked a baby out onto the street, that I'd destroyed a family over a misunderstanding, that I'd abandoned my brother in his time of need. I asked if they told him about the forged deed. He paused. No, he admitted. They said you overreacted. Overreaction. That word again. Like there's ever a measured way to respond to betrayal in your own home. Like I should have sent a fruit basket with the eviction notice. But I wasn't mad. Not anymore. I was just done. There's a quiet power in being unreachable. I wasn't blocking them out of bitterness. I was protecting the calm I'd built. The new rituals. Saturday mornings with fresh coffee and the windows open. Hosting dinners with people who didn't ask for proof of my generosity. Laying on my new couch, my couch, knowing that no one could show up and take the room from me. I even started dating again. Met someone at a gallery. She noticed my watch, asked about the maker. We talked about lines and texture and design theory. I didn't tell her any of this at first. Not for months. When I finally did, she didn't flinch. You didn't burn bridges, she said. You just stopped funding the construction. I like that. We moved slow. Healthy slow. No codependence. No fixing. Just sharing space and laughing about tiny things. She asked me once if I ever missed them. I thought about it. Not about their faces, but the idea of them. The idea that maybe, someday, they'd be proud of me for something that didn't benefit them directly. No, I said. I miss who I thought they were. But I don't miss who they turned out to be. She understood that. Most people don't. Most people want redemption arcs. Tidy resolutions. Tearful reunions. I don't. Some stories deserve clean endings. Some people earn the silence you give them. The last trace of them disappeared the day I changed the locks, again. Not because they tried to come back, but because I wanted the symbolism. Fresh key. Fresh slate. The locksmith asked if I was moving in for the first time. I almost laughed. No, I said. Just finishing. I'd kept the 64 box labels in a folder for months. I don't know why. Maybe I thought they'd be useful someday, like receipts for a dispute that would never happen. One afternoon, I went through them, slowly. Each one held a different kind of grief. Not for the objects, but for what they meant. Shared closet. Things left without asking. Kitchen drawer. Utensils taken as if borrowed, never returned. Bookshelf. Rearranged without consent. Little acts of erasure that seemed harmless until you saw them all at once. I shredded the labels and threw them out with the recycling. That was the last ceremonial purge. No anger. Just release. The apartment doesn't look anything like it did before. The walls are bare in some places, not because I haven't decorated, but because I like the clean space. I don't need to fill it to prove anything. My bookshelf is intentional now. Every item has meaning. Nothing left behind by accident. My life, distilled. I hosted my first real dinner party a year after the eviction. 8 people. Real plates. No chaos. Just laughter echoing off the hardwood and the low hum of music I picked without compromise. Someone brought a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce. Another guest brought homemade bread. No one overstayed. No one asked for anything I wasn't ready to give. After they left, I sat on the couch, my couch, and took it all in. This peace. I earned it. It came at the cost of being misunderstood, called cold, accused of cruelty. It required the kind of boundaries people don't celebrate, the kind that makes you look selfish to those who've always benefited from your selflessness. But I'd do it again, because I'm no longer the scaffolding for a crumbling family system. I'm not a spare room. I'm not a fallback plan. I'm a whole person, living in a space that reflects exactly who I've become. A few weeks ago, I ran into my brother. It was at a pharmacy, of all places. He was alone. He saw me, froze, gave a half-hearted nod. I nodded back. That's all. No words. No apologies. As I turned to leave, he said my name, soft, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to use it. I waited. He swallowed, eyes darting. We really didn't think you'd go through with it. I smiled. Not cruel. Not warm. Just honest. That's why it worked. Then I left. The best endings aren't loud. They're just complete.